I listened to a podcast called Harmontown, in which the writer Dan Harmon talks to his friends for an hour and a half to 2 hours in each episode, and it's usually comedy based and quite light-hearted, but they do occasionally touch on politics, and the parts of the show where they do start talking about politics are usually a little bit difficult for me to listen to. It's a little bit hard for me because I really respect Dan Harmon as a person. I think he's very smart, and I think above all he's very honest, and I really respect that, the way that he, as far as I can tell, he speaks completely honestly, and it seems like he's not ashamed to admit the worst parts of himself, which is kind of what makes the show very interesting, aside from the fact that it's just funny. But in a recent episode that I was listening to, he talked to a member of his audience from Australia, and the Australian was telling him about the political candidates and how the far right was coming to power in Australia.
So you guys are Nazi now?
Yes. Yeah. It's not good.
So it's just happening all over the planet. Just everyone's just going Nazi.
Nuts.
It's very sad, and there's no.
And everyone's like increasingly in your friend groups. Do you have friends who you go like, oh, I heard the fucking Proud Boys had a fucking party at the Baskin Robbins. Like, fuck that place. I don't want 31 flavors or anything. Do you have friends that are increasingly going like, well, I don't know. It's a fucking cancel culture's bullshit.
I do.
Like, what the fuck is this conversation? I just don't like Nazis. What the fuck? When did this happen?
Yeah.
But I was a little bit surprised when Dan said that, commenting on Australia, he said, oh, this rise of the Nazis is happening everywhere then, is it? This shift to the right. And I kind of just stopped and thought, like, hang on, these people actually believe that politics is moving further to the right, that the Overton window has shifted away from the left towards the right. Although I knew all of those people there thought that Donald Trump was a Nazi and that the Brexit was racist and all of these things, somehow it never occurred to me that the people on the left would consider the political discussion to be shifting rightward, when I've been assuming for years, probably since Donald Trump was elected, I've been assuming that the conversation is shifted to the left. And although you do hear people who talk more broadly about the conversation becoming polarized, meaning that it's shifting left and right, for some reason it had never occurred to me that people might think that it's shifting rightward. It just seems so impossible to me, just from looking at all of the same events. We're observing the same things, and yet coming to opposite conclusions. And it's my personal policy to always question whether I could be wrong about something, and to consider the opposite positions and try to look at it honestly and try to evaluate whether I could be wrong in this situation. But I'd never considered that I might not just be wrong, but I might be actually the opposite of right. I might be believing the opposite of the truth. If I look at the kind of policies that get talked about by my peer group and by the, in the media, when I was a teenager, the things that we would talk about were, well, for one thing, getting free tuition fees was a big thing, making university education free for everyone, and gay marriage, of course, before that was legalized. People were often complaining for that, equal marriage as it sometimes gets called. That doesn't get talked about anymore because it's kind of considered to be already done and dusted. I do recall that there was some argument around abortion, and that obviously has continued. But now if we look at what people are discussing on social media and in the news, they're talking about getting transgender people access to life-changing hormones. They're talking about restricting free speech to prevent hate speech. And they're talking about having an open borders policy for immigration. And more than any one of those policies, what I see is that the people who oppose those policies are now being vilified more than ever. It's considered an extremely evil position to be against any of these things. But on the other hand, I can't deny that we do have a conservative government in power in the UK, and in the US they have a Republican president, and what a lot of people consider to be a pretty far-right Republican. In the UK, we voted for Brexit 3 years ago, and that's often considered to be a right-wing position, even though we haven't actually got Brexit yet. It's still fairly widely supported. And so I do have to ask myself, are we going left or are we going right? Are we going both at once? Just thinking about economic policies, I can't really see much of a shift either left or right at the moment. I can't think of the biggest change in the last few years. The whole benefit system in the UK was recently replaced by universal credit, which was just a different way of kind of organising it. It's neither giving people more money nor taking away their money, broadly speaking. It's mostly on the social policies that we've been seeing these changes. Things like gender equality, racial equality, and transgender activism. The issue of transgender people was not even talked about or even known about 5 years ago or so. Maybe the first time I met a transgender person was when I was 18 and I went to university, and I was talking to another friend about it later, and they just didn't get it at all. They'd never heard of being transgender. They couldn't understand why I was calling this person she instead of he if they were born a man, and it was one of those things. It wasn't that people hated transgenders in particular. It was like no one even knew about them or even thought about it at any length. So to me it looks like there's been a massive shift in the leftward direction in terms of these progressive talking points and ideas. But to people on the left it seems that everybody's now suddenly racist, and that's a viewpoint that I don't even think I can understand. I think the reason it looks that way to some people is because they consider voting for Brexit to be a racist action, and similarly to voting for Donald Trump to be a racist action. So you'd have to assume that half of the UK and half of the US are racists. To me that seems like a ludicrous proposition, and yet there are these people who I consider to be very intelligent who are saying it. So I feel like I do have to wonder whether that's true. Even if it's not completely true, is there some small truth that we can find in that? There's that episode of The Simpsons where Principal Skinner asks himself if he's getting out of touch and he's getting too old to understand the children, and then decides, no, it's the children who are wrong. And that's become a meme now for people who are clueless about what's really going on, especially politically. Nobody likes to imagine themselves as Principal Skinner in that situation, but I think it's like the Dunning-Kruger effect. You can't... when you're the most wrong is when it's hard to see that you're wrong. So what I'm trying to do is just to examine my belief that the Overton window is shifting left and ask myself, where is that coming from? Am I correct in that? Or is it possible that I'm wrong? Or is it the children who are wrong? And that's all I have to say, really. It's, like I said, it's another one of these short videos. Although I think this one may not be that short. Leave your comments, and thank you very much for watching.